Okay, so our next topic is cross-hatching. And so the reason I always do cross-hatching right after cross-contour is that we've already talked about direction of line, and this is going to basically follow really nicely from that. So right here I have this object where you can see how the lines are being used to show the form really nicely and this curve. And I'm going to keep building that up a little bit. And then I'm going to do a couple other little demos for this. So the trick with cross-hatching, basically now what we're doing, and I talked about this a lot in the tutorial, is we're using our lines not just to show the direction of the form, that's important, but we're also trying to show value. Value being the way that the light and dark hits the form. So if we look at an object, especially like a rounded object or something like that, we'll notice that there's certain areas that are in shadow, there's certain areas that are in highlight, and there's certain places where there's midtones. So you want to start doing that when you look at objects. There's some things that the light will hit it in a really flat way. So say if you're looking at your desk, unless there's a light kind of shining bright on it, or maybe you're near a window or something, if you're just sort of in block and you're looking at one of those desks, they're usually the light on them is really, really flat. But if you go grab like a spherical object and you put a light next to it, or even have no light next to it, you'll notice that some areas around it are dark and some are light. So that there's, based on the lighting situation, there's going to be shadow and highlight and midtones and things like that. So we're trying to show value. So we're trying to show the way that the light and dark hits an object. And we're trying to use these lines and direction of line to build that up. So here we've got, this object, and I've been going over this and over this. So I'm going in the right direction, right? So when I want it to be going in this direction, I'm going like that. Then it turns and I'm going like this. Then it goes like this. And I just keep building up this sort of feel. And then here there's a highlight, so I just sort of will gradually show that the lines sort of dissipate. And then back over here and keep going. The big thing to remember with cross-hatching is that the sort of slow and steady mark is much better than, when you start doing this. If you start doing that, it just kind of all falls apart. So you don't want your lines to be haphazard. You want them to be, this takes a lot of patience, so you have to just kind of sit with it. And it's not for people that necessarily really love instant gratification. It takes a little while to get it looking the way that you want it to, but when you do, it looks really, really good. But all the people that always have a lot of success with this, they're like the patient people that can sit with it and, just be really slow and steady about the drawing. Okay, so this is this one area right in here. Okay, so I'm going to draw right over here a little sphere just to kind of give you an idea. Let me see, let me just grab a pencil. Okay, so I'm going to make a little spherical object, kind of like this. I'm going to start this just from scratch to show how I would deal with this. Now, I have this object right here, and now I want to shade it. So to shade it, and sometimes it's an issue of leverage too, like just moving yourself to where your arm's in a place where you can easily make those marks is really important. So I'm going to start, and I'm going to just sort of go in this direction. I'm trying to make sure that you can see this okay. See it better once I build it up more. So I'm not just going in all these random directions like that, right? I'm going in really specific direction to show the form. And then I can cross back over if I want, which in this case is useful because it'll help show that edge, but sometimes you actually really don't need to. But in this case, I'm going to. And I'm just going to keep building up this object. And my pen is seeing slightly better days. So another thing is a lot of times people, they don't want their pen to get too dark on them too quickly. So what people do is they try to use the side of it, and it gets this really scratchy mark. So if you're doing that, try not to do that because it's not going to look very good. just like be aware, like the pen is going to get a little bit, I mean, it's black ink, right? So even though I'm having you guys use it's like the most fine tip pen that you can really get, you're using a 005 and an 01, you're going to still notice that it's going to get dark because, you know, you're using black ink. So that's not, I'm not super worried about that. If you go over an object too much and you end up with absolutely no contrast or anything, well, that would be a problem because you want it to, you know, to have some areas where there's shadows, some areas where there's midtones. So right now I have like a dark area, a highlight over here, and another dark area. I'm going to make the top of it. You can start to see this coming along. And the way that you're going to have the object look really good is through contrast. So what contrast is areas of really dark near areas of really light. So you want to have a full value scale, and in the tutorial I talked about what a value scale is. It's basically just when you have, you know, you'll look at a value scale and you'll see it's like you make sort of these little boxes, and you have your darkest value and you have all your midtones and you have your light values, and you can kind of see you can see all the values that you want to have represented. And then you actually can look at your drawing and say to yourself, okay, well, you know, I have maybe really, really light areas and I have midtones, but I'm missing really dark values, so that's what I would want to put in. So having the lines be kind of small and close together is a good thing to do. You can kind of play around with a few different things. You're playing around with the speed of the line, the length of the line, the direction of the line. So more and more this gets, you know, this gets more and more realistic. And of course I have all this random stuff that I did to show you what not to do. That's kind of in the way, but it's okay. So that would be one example of cross-hatching. Another thing that you guys could practice doing sometimes if you want to, and I would recommend this if you ever have like shadows or objects that are really delicate, is what's called stippling. So I'm going to make a little sphere. And stippling takes a really long time because what you're doing is you're using little dots to show your form. So like I talked about patience a second ago, this is like, you need super patience for this. But basically what you're doing is you're laying down dots, and as you build up the dots, you build up the shadow. The nice thing about this, and this is good if you're having your mark get like too dark too fast, if you're having trouble controlling your mark and you just want to kind of get the feel for the pen, stippling is good. Like, it's kind of like very non-threatening because, you know, you can control it so easily because you can say, okay, well, that's enough, that's good, I'm going to move on to another area. It's not like when you're doing lines where it can kind of like, it can get away from you a little bit easier. With this, it builds up really, really, really slowly. And in areas where you want to have it be lighter, you just put fewer, you know, they're just further apart. Whereas like I'm going to have my shadow right here, this is my shadow, you know, I'm going to just keep building this up until it's really dark. But as you can see, it takes a good bit of time. So this is called cross-hatching in general, that's what I call it, but it's not always, you're not always having to cross over. Like if you remember in this one, I wasn't actually crossing over, and you don't have to. So sometimes it's useful to cross back over. Like in this, I wanted to keep this edge, so I wanted to have the direction of line that goes like this, like I wanted that to be clear, but I also want a nice edge, so I would use, you know, I would use cross-hatching, and I would actually cross over to show that. You know, go back to that a little bit. You can use stippling and lines too, so let's do that just to you know, so this is something will actually happen. You know, and my pen, I've also used this pen for a while, so as you use your pen, it'll actually give you lighter lines, which is nice. It makes it a little bit easier to control. When you first buy it, it's going to get kind of dark kind of quickly, but that's fine. You're just trying to get the feel of it, and you're really just trying to get the sense of value. So cross-hatching is still linear, and that's why we do it right after cross-contour, because cross-contour is linear, and by linear I just mean with lines, and so is cross-hatching. So we're going to do stuff later on the semester where it's like all blended, we don't use any lines, but right now we're still using lines. But cross-hatching is nice because it's kind of like, it includes both value, like we're dealing with value now, but we're still dealing with lines, which is what we've been dealing with so far. So I like doing cross-hatching kind of halfway through because it kind of serves both things. It helps us understand, you know, how to use lines well and direction of line and things like that. But it also starts to get into value. Okay, so I've got a little sphere right there, if you can see that. Okay, so that's good for now.